All right. Hello, hello. So good to see you all today. Come on in. Hey, I am on the road today, so we are doing this virtually from my car, but nonetheless, it is still going to be so super valuable. If you have never been to one of my events before, welcome. It's so fun to have you here. And if you have, welcome back. Some of you will know that the first thing that I love to do, besides getting to know where you all are tuning in from, so go ahead and drop that in the chat. I would love to know, are you locally here in Utah? I usually have a few that are there, but then we also expand. So I love seeing where everyone is getting to show up from. I'm usually down in Draper, Utah, point of the mountain, so about halfway through Salt Lake and Provo, if any of you are familiar with Utah at all. But today I am up in Bountiful. So feel free to also have your camera on, unmute yourself, make sure you have like water, notebook, anything like that. The things we're going to be diving in here today are so good. You're going to want to have something to write with, and I love making these interactive. So if you are feeling ready to do any of that, you are welcome to. Sometimes I know people are doing other things while they're listening to things like this, so no worries if that's you. To me, it's a chance for us to get to do life together. So I love getting to see if you've got, we've had people painting before, I've had people on a walk outside, cooking dinner, like whatever you got going on, you're welcome to. But as always, zero pressure, so you are welcome to show up as you are. Let's see. Okay, the other thing that I do at the start of all of my events like this is I want you to grab your phone. I want you to head on over to your alarms, and I want you to set an alarm for 9:09 a.m. or p.m. You can choose. And I want you to on that alarm put "I am not alone." Okay, this is one of my favorite things to do because every time I do one of these workshops, sometimes they are intimate with just a couple people here, like today. Sometimes they are massive. I've had like over 300 people before who have shown up to one. And every time I do this connection and this reminder, and when that alarm goes off, I want you to do two things. Okay, one is I want you to pause in whatever you're doing, and I want you to imagine all the other women that you're connecting with. I want you to see them in your mind's eye, and I want you to imagine sending just like light and love out to them. See them in their day and their challenges and whatever they're going on, and just be with them. Say, I'm here with you. I sit with you. I'm cheering for you. Like, you have got this. Anything that you're doing, just imagining and holding them in your vision. And then the second thing I want you to do, which is sometimes harder for us as women, especially, is I want you to practice opening up and imagining receiving that love back, like little pings of appreciation and connection from everyone else. Okay, so 9:09 a.m. or p.m. I am not alone. Okay, this is our reminder that the challenges that we have going on, no matter the difficulties, of course, we always have our spiritual support team of our heavenly parents, of Jesus Christ, angels and ancestors, and all that beautiful thing. But we also have each other. And even though we may not always be near each other, we may not be always in each other's lives, there is still something powerful in that spiritual connection that we can have and hold with each other. So I want to make sure you do that. And then I want you to head on over to your text, and I am going to put my phone number here in the chat. Okay, this is 385-212-4236. Okay, and I want you to text the word hope. Okay, send the word hope to that message, because this is one of the things I also love doing is I love creating a space to just connect with women and hop on a call and talk and open up just one-on-one. What is it you're feeling? What is it that's going on in your life? What do you feel like is more direction that you're looking for? There's something powerful in somebody just getting to hold us and see us in whatever it is we have going on. Sometimes there are other resources that I love to share with people. Sometimes there are opportunities for bigger connection. I have found this is just like an integral part. Sometimes I need the messages and the conversations, and so you might be somebody who has something that I need, and this is a way for us to connect. Sometimes I'm just the in between, and I'll be like, oh, you need to talk with this person, and share that connection there. So if you feel a pull at all to do that, I would encourage you to, again, text the word HOPE 385-212-4236, and that will give us a chance to connect more deeply. Okay? So that's all of our housekeeping stuff here at the start, which means now we get to dive into the main event of why we are here, which is really exploring and understanding more about what it means to be a strong spiritual woman and how to show up and fulfill that role well in our lives. Okay, so I want to start off by asking each of you, what is something that you feel like you are navigating right now and that you're maybe struggling a little bit with? And I'm going to share one of mine as well, because I know that sometimes it can be a little vulnerable to open up and share what our thoughts are and what our experiences are. But I found there's something beautiful when we do. And so for me right now, we're going through a lot of changes, and those changes are good and exciting in a lot of ways. They have to do with work and business and how we're doing things, as well as relationship and family and new opportunities for connection and relationship there. And there's a lot in that experience where there's this duality of not really knowing exactly how it's going to plan out. And you have a vision and you're holding and you're hoping that things are going to turn out one way, but having to get into that place of being willing to, you know, thy will be done kind of experience with trusting God in how things are going to play out and in your ability to be directed in things. And so that's been a big thing on my heart and mind recently. And this is something that matters to me because one of the things that I have found is that in my own life and my own experiences, we, especially as Latter-day Saints, have this beautiful history and tradition of being raised in a way where we are taught the nature of God and our relationship and our connection with God and our ability to rely on God and Jesus Christ and the powerful role that He plays in comforting us and carrying us, in supporting us through our hard times and our trials. And there is such a power and a beauty in that, and in getting to live our lives and operate from that. And yet, I have also learned that there are two other essential foundations in our ability to fully access and stand in that experience in some of the most difficult places in our lives. And for a long time, I was able to get pretty far in life and in the things that I was doing just by having that knowledge and connection and relationship there. Right? But over time, some cracks started to show up, and it was more difficult for me to be able to hold and stay in that space. And when that began to happen, there were things where I started to question more of myself. I had challenges that were showing up in my marriage and my relationship. I was worried about my kids and my parenting. I had a lot of emotions that I wasn't sure how to navigate all of them. And those can sound like they're, oh, that's just like a normal part of life, because it is just a normal part of life. And at the same time, it was also quickly becoming something that was weighing me down. There was a weight attached to it, like something heavy that I was having to hold and carry on. And these feelings of the self doubt and the struggle and the questioning and not knowing, they were moments where it felt like I was starting to lose a lot of what I had. And I was trying to continue to hold on to that, to stand in that truth. And it felt like I was just sinking deeper and deeper and deeper. Right? I can think of a couple of different pockets in my life where that happened. I'm curious if any of you have experienced something like that, right? Where you've struggled in feeling, "Hmm, how do I pull out of this?" Just like I'm getting deeper and deeper in it. Okay? Anyone else here experience that? Just me? Okay. Well, one of the things that I discovered is that sinking deeper and deeper, I thought was something going wrong in me. Right? Oh, I'm just not trying hard enough. Oh, I just need to communicate better. Oh, I just need to be more disciplined, right? Doesn't matter what it was. You can pick having a better exercise plan. You can say like doing better in the way we were managing our home or getting my kids to clean and help more, to my marriage, to my work, right? All of those different areas, there was often this feeling of like, I just need to be doing more. I just need more something, more time, more energy, more of something. And what I didn't realize at that time was God was not trying to sink me, but God was trying to help me become aware. Hey, there are two other foundational aspects here. And when you don't have those two other foundational aspects, it's a lot harder to hold on and stand in this space. And so, in order for me to access those, I had to be brought down, right? A little bit of that humility aspect I shown to men and women, their weakness, that they may be humble, right? That was very much a part of this experience. But it didn't feel like a humbling one. It felt, and like the way I was experiencing it was, this is something that is painful and hurting me, and I want it to change, and I want it to be different. And I think people or circumstances or God or somebody else outside of me needs to be doing something different in order for that to happen. And what was really difficult is there were certain times where that was literally true, right? There were things beyond my control that I could not control. And yet, here was God trying to invite me into a deeper understanding of my way of being in relationship to those circumstances, whether it was people, whether it was things happening in the world, happening in my own life, a deeper understanding and connection with that. Okay? So, um, as I went through each one of these processes and discovered what these foundations were, all of a sudden things began to shift and change. Like, it's kind of a cliche phrase to say that, of like, all of a sudden everything was different, right? And in some sense, it's not like it was all of a sudden, because if I look back at it, it's like nothing was happening, 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 right? Like, for such a long period of time, it felt like nothing was changing or shifting. But then there came a moment where all of a sudden everything was different. And what I realized about that, and what I now walk women through all the time inside of my work and mentorship, is recognizing what's happening during that nothing's happening season is our transformation that is occurring, right? We are not only being prepared, but molded into the person we need to be in order to create those experiences that we are looking for in our life. And when it feels like all of a sudden everything's coming together, it's because the timing and our abilities and the experiences and the things that we've walked through have all led us to that moment. Right now, I know saying this is nothing new, especially for those of you who are here. I'm usually working with an LDS crowd, and so that's like a common part of things, is we are seeking to grow, to become more like God, that this life is an opportunity for us to do those things. And yet, one of the things that I don't hear as often and that I struggled with was it always kind of felt like a random process, right? Like, okay, well, where am I? Like, are we in the nothing's happening right here stage of thing? Or like, we in the nothing's happening, but something's about to happen thing, right? Like, it would be nice to know where I am in this process, and like, how long is this going to take? And what exactly is going to happen at the end of all of this, right? Now, of course, none of us are God. We cannot predict the future. Everyone has free will and agency, and there are multiple ways that things can play out. And I have come to discover that there are some very specific patterns when it comes to our development. And when we are in those patterns and we have an awareness of them, it can help us get a better bearing of what's going on. So even though we don't necessarily know exactly when or exactly how it's going to play out, we can have a better understanding of the terrain and how to navigate through it. And what that does is it actually makes it easier and more enjoyable as we're going through these patterns and experiences of growth and expansion. Okay? Now, I have a whole construct that I teach around this. It's called the staircase model. I have a separate video. I think it's linked on my Instagram if you guys are over there, that goes into some of this in more detail. But it essentially maps out that there are 8 different stages that we go through in the process of growth and expansion. So expansion is when we are opening up into something new becoming possible in our lives, right? So when a child like starts a new grade, right? That is expanding into the next level of school. But then just because we've expanded doesn't mean we fully like created that possibility in our lives. And that's where growth comes in. Growth is kind of the horizontal movement, where expansion is the vertical. And so when we're growing into something, that's where we're practicing. We're putting the repetition in. We are becoming that person. And so there's this idea sometimes where it's like, oh, I need to expand, right? Like one of the cliche, I'm using the word cliche because I've heard it so many times when I work, especially with women or mothers in particular. But it even shows up in businesses with this whole idea of like, I need to expand, I need to hire a team, right? But I need to make more money before I can hire the team. But I need to hire the team so that I can make more money, right? Same sort of thing of like, I need more energy or I need more time so that I can like better utilize or like create a routine or build the structure that I need in my life. But I have to build the structure that I need in my life so that I can get the time or the energy that I need, right? And so there's this like catch 22 that kind of shows up between our need for expansion and our need for growth. And that's where a lot of people get stuck. There's this tension there that's just like, oh, how do I move forward in this, right? And this can even show up in different things with like God and faith and the church, right? I want to grow in this spiritual ability, but I'm still struggling with this. I want to see a new perspective that God has of what's possible, and I'm not sure about some of these questions or things that I have, right? There's this tension that can show up all over in our lives. It can show up in our marriage or relationship, right? Like if only he was better, then things would be great. And yet we also need to be trying to get through just the day to day of what's going on, right? There's all of these tensions that we feel. And most of the time, when we're stuck in those tensions, we're either defaulting to just one or the other, right? As like, well, if I could just go all in on this, or if I could just go all in on that, that would help me. And what I've discovered is instead there is this singular path in between, but it is different than what we think, right? When I describe it like this, it looks like a linear thing. So we're bringing the two, the growth and the expansion into a place here where they hone in together. But if you were to zoom in on that path there, what you would see is they actually are intertwined with each other. And so there's this process of expansion and then growth, and expansion and then growth, and expansion and then growth. And what this does is it's almost like pedals on a bicycle, right? One goes up while the other goes down. One goes up and then the other goes down. And it is from that movement of the pedals being in different positions at different times and being propelled into a new spot that actually creates the momentum that moves the bike forward. Right? So the same thing is true in our own lives and experiences, that there is this pattern of growth and expansion. And when we move through it, it propels us forward in the experiences that we can have. Okay. Now, why does this matter? Well, one of the things I am super passionate about is supporting women in recognizing and better understanding the prophecy that was given by President Kimball back in 1979. Now, I am not claiming to be President Kimball himself or any official leader of the church who is saying like, this is the official definition of what is going on here, right? What I do is I study things. I look and I see what is shared here. What is the thing that is being understood? And how do we better become the women who are capable of fulfilling that prophecy, and any ways that in my experience or skill set, how can I better support women and share that with them so that we can better understand and fulfill this prophecy, right? So some of the ways that looks like, if you're not familiar, back in 1979, President Kimball gave a prophecy in which he declared that much of the major numerical and spiritual growth that would come to the church would happen in a large part because of the women of the church. That's a like short synopsis of it. And then yeah, here we go. Sorry about that, guys. My phone. But we are here. So in 2015, um, this is when President Nelson actually came out and said, "Hey, you know that prophecy back around 1979? Well, the day that he foresaw it is today, and you are going to win it." Okay? I will never like spoke to something in me. And then it was just like, okay, it's out there. But it wasn't necessarily like, here's your manual, here's how to become the person, here's what to do. It was just like, okay, thanks, here we go. Right. And so what I love doing, and I have a series of lives that I've been doing on Instagram where I'm walking through some of the different talks and helping us see what is this bigger picture that is here. Because if you look at it, there really is this powerful framework where the church globally just met right before President Kimball gave that address the year before. And it was the first time that the women globally had met in their own meeting. So it was the first time they had like a women's session of conference. The following year, right? So that's the initiating event. The following year, President Kimball's sick, his wife Camilla is the one who gives his talk, and this prophecy comes out. Well, his talk also has this powerful framework underlying kind of, if you just look at the surface level things of what he's saying, that really are kind of random if you're thinking about it until you look underneath, and there's this powerful framework there. And that framework then leads to this is what will happen. And so there's a story that starts emerging of like, hey, globally, the women in the church, there's a specific role for you to play. And in fact, President Kimball's talk is called The Role of Righteous Women. And so then he gives us this framework, how to become those women, and speaks to what is potentially able to result as we become those women. Then we fast forward, and President Nelson is now saying, hey, ladies, it's time. Like, time to step it into this. And after that, we actually see an uptick in the number of talks and addresses that are specifically speaking to women about their spiritual power, about understanding the role of covenants, of being able to access priesthood power in the temple through the endowment, right? There's just like all of these essential things coming in. And so all of this harkens back to me in a really powerful and meaningful way. Of one of the themes that emerges is this need for women to be able to stand in light, to be beacons to the world and just radiate truth and goodness and share that. And when we think about that again, there's something so powerful in that. But there again is also this underlying foundation that is necessary in order to be able to understand how to do that well, right? It's not to say that we can't do it, but it's about saying if you know where you stand in those other two areas of development of your feminine as a woman, then the more strength and the more power you have access to. Because it is, again, in any sort of relationship, there's not just God here, right? If God was going to do it all, God could, right? So if we're supposed to just be totally reliant on God 100%, like there would be no need for us. But the whole point is this relationship, this ability to grow and to expand. And so that requires us as the other part, which means we still have things to do. We are still meant to grow and develop. And in fact, that is part of the point. God uses opportunities like this to shape us and to mold us. So learning to understand, well, what is this pattern and process of growth and expansion? How do I move through that, right? As well as recognizing that it's not just a pattern of growth and expansion, but it actually looks like two ribbons that are intertwined with each other, kind of like braided back and forth. And so that intertwinement is actually showcasing a relationship between what I call masculine and feminine. Now, masculine and feminine can be kind of charged words for people, so I want to get very clear on what I mean when I'm talking about them, okay? I love to use masculine and feminine in terms of what I call the energetic meaning behind that. Now, when I'm talking about this, I'm not necessarily saying like, I don't know, whatever comes to mind when you're thinking about the word energy. Like my husband is a physicist, so he goes to like physical energy and what does it literally look like? And then there's also the like woo-woo side of like energy. And so it's like, what are you meaning here? But when I talk about it, I am describing the intangible patterns and processes that are underlying every aspect of our communication, our relationship, our experiences. They have this essence to them, right? And so we can quantify this we're going to keep going here. So thanks for hanging with me. So the two pieces that we have here are this idea of recognizing there are two collections. The same way we have like positive and negative charge in chemistry that exist, right? And so you have atoms and they have this relationship with the charge, and you use those to describe and understand the relationship that exists between them. The same thing that shows up in ones and zeros in computer programming, depending on the relationship of those ones and zeros, to create all sorts of things that come out of it, right? So I love looking at the feminine as this divine pattern that helps us understand a lot about our relationship. And what I love about the Revealed Gospel is we have idea that gender is an essential and eternal characteristic, which is, to me, speaking to this idea that there is this essence that exists even beyond just our physical bodies, right? There is some aspect of who we are and how we show up and how we are in relationship with one another that matters. We also have the beautiful theology of being children of heavenly parents, right? So again, there's this pattern of having a heavenly father and a heavenly mother, and specific roles and understandings that follow suit from that. Now, there's not a lot that we know about how does God actually function in that partnership and what shows up, but there's a lot of teaching that we have around the roles of men and women and being in relationship with one another. And when we know that God's pattern is that of families, it makes sense that the more we understand what cultivates healthy families, that then can be reflected back in different ways to what we are learning or seeing in God, right? So there's this beautiful synergy back and forth between our human experiences and between this divine experience and these patterns that play out. And so I have done a lot of time in studying of understanding what are these different patterns and recognizing that there's a way for us to understand and recognize our own masculine and feminine developmental process. Okay. Now, this is kind of like the idea of there is physical development that we go through, there's social development, mental and emotional development, right? There is this process for understanding and recognizing what is that design and essence of masculine and feminine, and how do we learn to operate with and embody that in our own individual lives. And the more we understand that, the more it benefits every aspect of us, because we are now harmonizing or living in harmony with the design that God created, which improves and impacts our physical well-being, our relationship well-being, our mental, our emotional, right? There's this relationship that shows up. And so when we're looking at understanding, okay, how as women are we able to stand more in this light, fulfill this work of this great prophecy, to go and understand this pattern of growth and expansion that we're moving through? And what are these two other foundations that are necessary for us to develop? Right? Well, in order to understand those two necessary foundations, we need to understand what is the developmental pattern and process and ultimately role of women. And I love to describe this in three specific things. The first is, one of the first roles of women is to bear love. Okay. And I love this word bear with it, because it makes it a very active thing, right? It is not just like, oh, I have this general love and good sense of well-being for others. So that's a part of it, right? There's an active piece in it. And if you think about, especially many women who you know who are just like the most loving, kind, caring people, it is an active part of who they are, right? It is not just this general feel good kind of sense. Right? And there's a piece that comes with that. Bear also has this idea of bearing one another's burdens or bearing a child, right? It brings with it this connotation of a weight that comes with that love, and that love has a role or a purpose beyond her. Right. And so there are a few different ways to understand and recognize this, but the first lesson we're meant to learn in our feminine development is this idea of I am love. We start with that, right? And where does that love come from? It comes from God, right? Because I am an extension of God, and because God is loved, I am love. And as I learn that, I'm supposed to like learn that through the process of receiving love from others, right? So ideally, we have parents, we have family, we have community that helps reinforce that understanding to us of I am love. And so we recognize I am love, we begin to receive love, and then in return, we begin to express love. Right? And there's a few different archetypes for the feminine that I love to bring in here because it just paints another picture of what does this actually look like in our tangible everyday life and experiences. Okay. So when we're looking at this first lesson or this first role, a big part of this is around recognizing that we are again, meant to learn these lessons around love. So some of those archetypes that show up can be things like the giver, right? So this is someone who is just naturally a caretaker of others. That can be like a mother or tending to the elderly or somebody in need. This can also just be a state of being where you're regularly noticing what are the needs that others have and showing up and fulfilling that, right? That is a powerful thing that comes out of this first lesson here. Now, in that first lesson as well, and these different archetypes that show up, there are also like the challenges that can emerge. So one of the challenges for the giver is an overextension of self, right? To the point that we perhaps start losing ourselves. We can fall into patterns of people pleasing. We can not learn to develop well our own sense of what are our needs. How do we rest? How do we make sure that when we are giving, we are doing so from an overflowing state rather than from a depleting one? Okay. Um, and so that's one example there. There's also others like the muse and the lover and the princess. I love the princess because that is the first one of recognizing this archetype idea of like, I have a purpose. There's a role for me to play. The same way a princess grows up into a queen. There's that initial recognition of value, right? So love and learning our relationship with that and how to bear that love well is one of the first steps in this developmental cycle. Okay. The second one that we move into is the second lesson we're meant to learn is all about I create through that love. So not only am I this love, do I receive it, but now I am meant to create something with it because that love wants to be experienced and expressed in the world. Okay. So this first lesson is to bear love. The second lesson is to create life, right? So the most obvious version of this creating life comes down to literally the creation of physical life and women physically taking a spirit, giving it form, and bringing it into this world. But that is something that can also be expressed and experienced in a lot of different ways, taking something intangible, giving it form, and bringing it into the world. So there may be an idea, there may be a relationship, there may be an experience, right? Even the way that you cook and care for your home can be, taking an idea of a desire that exists for a nourishing meal for your family, giving it form by starting to gather the ingredients and set aside time to prepare it, and then actually bringing it into the world and creating that experience of being able to eat that food with your family. Learning to operate from this place of this pattern of creation, which essentially involves this process of birth as well, is so fundamental to this whole experience. And so that becomes the second level. And it's easier to operate from that place of creation when we, again, have that foundation of love and joy and pleasure that is meant to first exist. And then it leads us into this second experience. Now, from there, the third lesson that we are meant to learn is
Okay, so this third experience that we share, the third lesson of on is all about this idea of I have influence, and that influence is not something I am meant to chase or chase with, but I naturally bring it into my experience as I am. So we have love, life, and it's this beautiful imagery of recognizing when we're beginning with this experience of relationship, of that love, of that joy. We then again start giving it form. We're creating something different. And as we do, we bring that to the world. And that thing we bring to the world is greater life for ourselves and for others. And so there's, again, beautiful patterns here, understanding not only this role of women, but how do we move through it? How do we progress? And what I found is very interesting is there are things that you have to be able to do, like skill sets for each one of these stages. So the first one, we're wanting to, how do I begin to experience more of this? The first key aspect is learning to recognize we are emotional. Okay. Now, invariably, anytime I talk about stuff like this, there are things that come up that's like, well, both men and women have emotions to be able to feel emotions, or both men and women have feminine and masculine elements, and different people and different personalities have different of these traits within themselves. You can't just make these generalizations one way or another. I want to speak to that for a second, because this is something that is so much more layered than the conversation often has, right? We tend to get into one of two different places. One side of this conversation is, no, there are absolutely these essential things, and men are this way and women are this way. So we go on the other side and we say, no, there's just this big variety of things, human things, and we all are meant to have all of these. I view this as there is truth in both of those things, and we need to understand them and how they work well together. So for me, I see that there are essential patterns that show up, again, in this masculine and feminine dynamic. And there are also different ways that we as individuals and as men and women can experience and express those fundamental truths that exist. Okay? And that our goal is to learn to understand the fundamental truths and principles that God has been teaching and revealing and established and designed, and recognize who we are as an individual and how we are meant to be in relationship with those things and how to be in relationship. Okay? So when I'm talking about this idea that women are emotional, what I'm saying here is in the feminine pattern and process, I have seen again, this repetition show up that our orientation with the world is often more based on that heart space first, not only, but first, rather than the mind space, which is often where the masculine gets. Okay? Again, first, and the masculine doesn't have a heart, we want masculine to have a heart, just like we want a feminine to have the mind, bring those two together. Okay? So there is a completion in this, but there is a difference in how they relate to each other and how they move through that process. And that difference is often inverse and opposite of one another, right? So start in different places, we move in different directions, we do this. Okay? Why this matters so much? Because for women who are living today in our modern world, we have developed a whole bunch of technology, right? And what's cool about this is these cycles and these patterns of masculine and feminine dynamics are something we can see throughout history, right? So we began more in a feminine state, right? With your tribe and more connected a community. Those are all traits that are more feminine in nature. As history went on, we had things like the Industrial Revolution, and moving in mind, productivity, becoming more individualized. So like city rather than community and family based. Those were all the shifts towards more of a And we, again, need this back and forth to be happening because there is this process of we need to expand, right? And we need to grow. Right? And so there's this perpetual relationship of how do we bring more of that relationship element that is found in family with improved ways of experiencing that life and relationship together. But then we cannot focus so much on the improvement that we lose sight of what the original thing was, which is relationship and family. We kind of go through this perpetual process of integrating the different masculine, feminine, and it's like cycle. Okay? So we're currently coming off of a big masculine work. There's been a huge emphasis on the mind, on the individual, on productivity, on making things happen. And so this
Naturally, by being alive in the societies that we're in, particularly here in the Western world, to a place where the mind is prized. Logic, reason, fact is most essential. Okay? And this actually creates an imbalance that has a bigger effect on women, not because we don't have good intellect or can't, but because we have a different way of relating to it, accessing it, getting to it. And it starts through this emotion space and then often moves into the intellect. And what tends to happen, especially with spiritual women, is they will have this deep connection with God and the divine, right? That is coming into their experience, and they can feel the peace and they can feel the love and they can have that connection. And then they have this experience that is in their mind, right? Overthinking, all the worry, all the concern, like, just like indecisiveness. I don't know, what did they think of my comment? All sorts of mind chatter that can be happening. And this split that happens between that spiritual and the mental actually stalls the process and makes it so that there's not the right movement. It's like a chain on your bike getting off. And so, like, the pedals can't work properly to move where they need to. And part of that is because the heart is not being included in the process of how do I come through this thing that I have here, this divine connection or inspiration. I need to bring it into my heart to feel something, receive the wisdom or knowledge that is trying to come in here, and then send that information up to my mind to then focus on it and move into action. And that's what completes the full circuit there. Right. But if we don't know how to, one, regulate our emotions or navigate them, oftentimes those emotions in and of themselves become like blockages here, almost like the same way you can have blockages in your heart, right? That can cause a heart attack. It causes that disconnect that can show up. So beginning to learn how to feel our emotions, to process them, to allow those things, that becomes an essential part. But it's more than just, can you regulate your emotions, right? It is learning how to experience the world through this place of heart first, mind second, right? And I think there is a huge craving for that in our world right now, which aligns perfectly with this prophecy and idea of women. We need to be showing up more in the world, shining this light, because we have moved into this masculine space. We need to move into a feminine one. And part of that is remembering the heart, the relationship, the purpose, the connection. And remembering that this human experience is not just about our human experience, but it is that we are divine too. We are literal children of God, brothers and sisters, learning to be in relationship and connection with one another. What does that look like in our day-to-day lives? So learning how to feel, how to utilize emotion, how to connect from that place, that becomes the first skill that is essential in this process. Right. And so a few things that you can look at for yourself of where you are in that is recognizing, how do I feel about my emotions in general, right? Like, how much time
So where are you in your life experience, right? Like how much of your day-to-day life do you spend noticing your feelings, recognizing your emotions, allowing yourself to feel them? Or are you so focused on getting through tasks and the things that you get done in the day that you're not really giving them the time or space to breathe and to sit? Okay, so that's one thing. Another thing to be looking at is how do you feel about negative emotions, right? How well have you integrated into yourself the ability to hold space for anger, for frustration, for
This from me type of thing? Or do you know how to integrate both your human experience and the divine power and part of who you are so that it's not, I'm running away from my part of self, rescue me from this, but it's, hey, I'm in this experience and I'm allowing God to meet me in that and pull me through to somewhere else. It's a very different thing, but it requires us to actually be willing to feel those emotions. Okay. So those are a couple of things around where you are in processing that emotion. You can also ask yourself a couple of questions here in how often do I approach life from a mind first state versus a heart first state? Okay, so here's a way to think about that. Are you regularly making decisions first and foremost off of like, I have to think my way through this. What are all of the problems? What are the things I need to do right? What do I need to consider? What's the best decision to be making out of this? Or do you start by orienting yourself to your heart and getting clear on what is it that I want? What is it that I feel? What is the experience I want to, again, bring form to and bring into this world? That is very different. That is a experiential, emotional starting point. And then from there, we send it up to the mind of like, okay, now that I have that foundation in place, how do I want to go about doing these things? Whereas when we start with the mind, we sometimes miss that other foundational piece of, and we create something where it's like, well, we got this result, but that's not actually what I wanted. And I'm got something good out of it, but I'm still annoyed or I'm still frustrated, right? Versus the heart is again that more connection of how to more reliably connect with the inspiration we receive and bring it into our life and our experience. So again, asking yourself, how often do I turn to my heart? How often do I turn to creating from what I feel versus what I think? And again, that's a little different than what am I being inspired in, but recognizing what is the role of your emotions in bridging that gap between that connection you feel with God and moving things into your mind so they can start to take form in action. And if you've never experienced that before, that is one of my favorite things to introduce them into, is this idea that our emotions are actually a roadmap helping us learn how to navigate through that. It's a whole separate process we don't have time to go into for today, but those are a couple of questions for you to be thinking about. Okay. When we look at the second skill, though, that is necessary to develop, this second skill is focused more on this pattern and process of birth, right? So we are very used to, again, I'm going to go hunt something down. I'm going to go create, I'm going to build something, right? And there's a different process for building something versus birthing something. When you build something, you like make the blueprint, you go and gather the materials, you measure and cut them out, and you make the thing happen. When you are birthing it, it is not that precise, right? You have a general understanding of where things are going, but there's a deeper level of trust through the process and allowing things to emerge and unfold in their own time and in their own place and their own way. And what is really fascinating is we have really forgotten the truth that as women, we are cyclical beings, right? So, of course, the most obvious representation of this is again looking at our physiology and recognizing the way that we menstruate and even the overall seasons that we have. That there is a season of before menstruating, when we are menstruating, preparing to end menstruation, and having completed menstruation, right? So that's this whole cycle that we move throughout our entire lives. Okay. as well as when we are menstruating, right? There is that cycle that plays out within us, but it is more than just a physical process because, as we know, as Latter-day Saints, we are more than just physical human beings. We are also divine spiritual beings. And so there is another part of this creative process that exists intangibly. And when we are not working with it and operating within it, we burn out, we get exhausted, we feel like we don't have enough time, we don't have enough energy. And usually it's because we are trying to follow this linear pathway of masculine building instead of approaching our life and everything that we're doing from a cyclical nature and way of existing. Okay. And that cyclical nature is the thing that allows you to be able to juggle multiple different things that exist in your experience, right? Whether that is, okay, I'm going to like start working on this thing, and then I have a child come and interrupt me, and now I have to like go pick somebody up, and now I got to get dinner started, and I still need to get this thing done, right? When you try to judge yourself off of a linear perspective, it will look like you are constantly falling short, right? Like, oh, I can't get this task done. Oh, I just need to focus in on this one thing. And that is simply not a part of our design. We are meant to be cyclical beings, which means you touch on all of these different pieces as you're moving throughout them. But again, if you don't know how to recognize that, you don't know how to integrate it into your life, you're just going to have to, what ends up happening is most women are compensating for not operating in that divine design. And when that compensation happens, we're more drained, we're more depleted, we burn out faster, we start to build resentment and frustration. Whereas when we learn to operate within it, we actually become able to get more done. And we are doing less in the process because we're not having to compensate anymore. We're letting that natural pattern and process unfold. Okay. So not only do we need to establish this good connection and know how it flows and tap into what it is to be an emotional being, we have to understand what it is to be a cyclical one and to go through this process of birth, right? Again, taking something that is intangible, giving it form and bringing it into the world. That becomes a living, breathing part of how you do life if you want to have these solid foundations in place. And when we do that, right, we have both of these things in place, it gives us that greater ability to stand in light and truth. Okay? Because not only do we have this like frame that is in place that is fueling the things that we are doing and how we're showing up in the world and in our lives, it is based in a place of connection and operating from that heart space. So we get the good foundation in place, the proper way of moving through it, and that's what actually allows us to start shifting. And when you add on top of that, being able to recognize not only the patterns and process of how we move through this, and a basic ability to know when you are connected, when you're disconnected, how well that flow is working, right? And add on top of that the ability to communicate more clearly and distinctly, as well as helping others understand differences in ideas and who we are and how we show up and our experiences. Dang, now you got a full package, right? And I don't care if what you're passionate about is like, I feel like I need to be sharing the gospel more online as a part of helping fulfill this prophecy. Or if you feel like the thing that is showing up most in your life is like, I need to be starting to homeschool. I need to be doing better with our nutrition. I need to be working on our marriage. There's so many struggles and problems and things that are going on right now. Like those things are also an essential part of fulfilling this prophecy. Okay. Sometimes I think we get it in our mind that the work of the women is like, okay, we're going to suddenly like take over online and we're going to be sharing the gospel with everyone we need, like missionary style. And that's what's going to be happening. And yes, I think that's going to be a beautiful part of it. And it has to be driven behind by the feminine process, which means it's not going to actually be about your visibility or how much you're sharing or how many conversations you have or anything. Be a natural experience of
It is all about who you are being. Okay. When we look at the complex, even going back to one by President Bull and multiple ones given by President Nelson, this is one of the key things that we see repeated over and over and over again. Who are you? Okay? And there's a reason for this. Okay? If you look at a lot of like, especially when we had the men and women sessions at conference, a lot of the men sessions.
Okay, that's the masculine pathway. Women access doing through being. Okay, so we have to get solid on this being part first. And that means understanding this full pattern and process of our design as women. How do we bear love? How do we give life? And how do we stand in light? Right? Standing in light is hard to do when you don't have the skill of operating from that cyclical nature. Operating from that cyclical nature is hard to do if you aren't well practiced in how to connect with the emotions that you're having and that you're feeling and what that connection is meant to move and drive you through. Okay. But if you have all of those skills together, it gets so fun. Okay. Because now you're not just doing something in an attempt to try and fulfill this prophecy or accomplish any other challenge in your life that you have. You have actually followed a pattern for helping you become able to be the woman who can then do whatever is necessary or asked or required of you, either by God or in your everyday life and experiences. And that is what I am so passionate about helping women learn to do. Because we can't talk about this all day, right? I could sit here and I could tell this to you again and again and again. Like, these are the things that matter. This is what it looks like. This is how you do it. You probably got some notes already, like, oh, this is good. I never realized that before. I need to know this, right? Those aha moments are good, but they're in your mind. Okay. They need to become an integrated, embodied part of who you are. Okay. And the way that we do that is through practice and relationship. If you think about one of the most beautiful and powerful roles of a mother, and why I believe mother is the highest title a woman can receive, and the reason I claim that is because of Heavenly Father and Heavenly Mother. They did not choose Grand Supreme Ruler of the universe like a human being would have, right? They chose these titles for a reason. And yes, I believe there's a part of that that is because we are their children and this familial relationship and pattern that exists. But it is also a representation of a way of being. Okay. And so, regardless of if you have children, what your relationship with your own mother or anyone else looks like, you can learn this pattern and process of being. Right? It is one that exists throughout all of it, and it is hardwired into our biological, physical experience as a woman. But it is also this pattern that we can practice, and mothers do this all the time, right? It is through being in relationship with your mother that we learn so much of that is the foundational aspect of who we are. There's not a lot of the same thing of like, I'm going to sit down and teach you this different thing. There's so much that we just absorb through experience, right? And it is that experience and it is that relationship that helps shape who we are being. So when it comes to helping support women in ways to support them in being able to become somebody, we also need to provide opportunities for relationship and experience, right? Because when we don't have those, the impacts are real, right? I have seen countless times over the last 10 years the impacts that show up for women who have not learned this pattern and this process, who are not living it in their day-to-day lives and are not and don't know how to create a relationship from that place, whether it's with a parent, with a spouse, with a child, with a coworker, with a neighbor, right? And what happens is there are a few different impacts that I see show up again and again. First one shows up physically, right? Literally, the physical body takes the hit. This can show up in all sorts of maladies. For me, landed me in the hospital with some malformed blood vessel in my stomach that randomly started bleeding. It was not random. It was absolutely an indicator of an impact, that showed up in my life because I was not living in alignment with this pattern and process. And I had to go through the whole, like, God is going to crush you until you are willing to listen experience before I started opening up to being willing to learn this pattern. Literally, God had to bring me to the brink of death so that I was so weak I couldn't do things for myself, that I began to learn how to receive. And being willing to learn how to receive opened up a doorway for me in learning to recognize I had to start putting a bigger priority on myself in understanding this pattern, on being willing to make it a priority in my life. And every time that I did, I felt the repercussions show up in my life over and over again. Because not only was it impacting my physical health, it was also impacting my energy, my time, my resources, financially and relationally, right? And so as I moved through this process, I got returns on all of those. I had an increase in energy that showed up. My time was better utilized and managed, and my relationships and finances both began to blossom in ways I previously could not have comprehended because I had no understanding of what happens when a woman moves through this process and learns to live it and actually embodies it. But we're actually told a part of this in the story of the creation. There's a beautiful thing, I can't remember her name right now, Amber Dawn, I want to say, but I heard her speak once and she pointed this out in such a beautiful, more elegant way. So I'm not going to try and replicate it. Go find her stuff, listen to it. But the idea that she mapped out was that the entirety of the creation story was leading up to the culminating act of creation, which was Eve. Right? Now, when we look at this through a lens of like, oh, well, Eve is so special and so miraculous, of like, we think somebody being at the top is just inherently better than everyone else, we're missing the point, right? That is not why we say Eve is the pinnacle here of this creation story. And everything, including Adam, was here to support her. It's because of understanding what happens when a woman thrives, okay? Remember, she bears love, she gives life, and she stands in light. And so when you help a woman thrive, she takes everything given to her and replenishes it. Right? So there's this beautiful synergy. It's actually beautifully represented in our relationship with the earth and the idea of Mother Earth, that everything, all life comes from Mother Earth. And the more we tend to her, the more she replenishes and gives us more of what we need back. Right? And so it's the same sort of idea. All of life exists to support the feminine, because when we support the feminine blossoms and she gives more life and more joy and more creation and abundance to all. Everyone benefits. And because there's more available, now life can support her more fully. Right? It's this beautiful synergy that shows up. And so sometimes I talk to women and they're like, oh, I just can't do this. I don't know that this is the right thing. Like, there's so many other things I need to be prioritizing in my life. I wish I could just like shake them and be like, there is literally nothing more impactful that you can do for your life, your relationships, or any other community or the world that you care about than to help yourself learn this pattern so you can thrive, so you can become that life-giving source. Right? It is a part to me of following Jesus Christ and becoming a disciple as a woman. He is that fountain that is overflowing of life. And so when I partner with him and he helps me understand more about who I am and my nature as a daughter of God and helping me understand that pattern and walk it, I then become that much more like him, that much more able to be overflowing and giving life to and light to those around me. So it is not just an essential thing for me and my life, it is an essential thing for my journey and my process in being a disciple of Jesus Christ, right? And yet, it's still so hard, right? Because then there comes all the stories of like, well, this feels like a lot of pressure, and this feels like a lot of responsibility, and this feels like something I'm not sure I can measure up to. And like, Emily, that may seem fine and wonderful for you, but like, I'm not that capable. I'm not that great. I'm not that skilled in all these different things. Like, I don't think I can do this. Right? Those are very, very real. Right? There are ones that, man, they're an integrated part of the experience because there is no woman who has ever birthed a child and not had a moment, even if just a fleeting one, where she questioned her ability to actually birth that child. Right? There's a reason midwives have that cliche of knowing that when a woman says, I can't do this, that baby's close to coming. Right? I can't do this. And I want to say to you, sisters, if you're feeling that, I can't do this, that's because we're close. Right? We are close to the life, to the joy, to the return of Christ. So it's okay. It's okay that you're feeling that way. And it's okay that your brain is now going to spin around and it's going to look at every reason that you can't, every reason that is evidence of your incapability as a natural part of the brain, right? It doesn't know how to go forward. And so it wants to stay where it is. It wants to stay comfortable. That's not how birth works, right? And there's this piece, again, found in the pattern of mothering. When you have a child, there is a question of doubt. Can I actually raise this child? I don't know what I'm doing. All of that is normal, right? We figure it out as we go along, but we have to be willing to say yes to the process, yes to the experience, yes to being able to grow through it. That this isn't like a job, right? Again, used to this masculine starting with the mind space. I'm going to go and I'm going to study and I'm going to learn all of these things so that now I'm qualified to be able to get this job and hold this position. And now I'm going to practice becoming and being the boss, right? Masculine developmental pathway. There is not a course. You don't go through the same kind of education, right? The initiation is menstruation, conception, pregnancy, and birth. That is the course. You live it, you experience it, and it shapes you so that you're being, and that gives you more of a foundation so you can then do the things necessary as that role of a mother. It's a very different pattern and a very different process, but no less powerful and meaningful and significant, and it can be applied to every aspect of your life. And when I see women who don't, I see the costs show up, and they tend to show up in 5 different areas. This is another little one. I want you to do a little note-taking thing here, 1 to 5. I want to know which one of these areas is it showing up the most in your life. 1 is in your relationships, right? So this could be your marriage, right? Maybe you keep having the same argument over and over. Maybe you feel like you can't emotionally connect. Maybe you feel like you're trying to share things and to open up and to grow together, but it just isn't landing. You're not seen, you're not understood, you're not supported, right? Relationships. This can also include relationships with your parents, relationships with your children, young or grown adults, anywhere in between, with friends, feeling like you don't have that sense of sisterhood or community or connection and you're isolated and alone, right? Costs show up relationally. Next, they show up in our relationship with ourselves. Okay, so this is where we're questioning our capabilities. We have huge imposter syndrome. We feel like a fake in everything that we're doing. We question whether we can actually show up, if we are enough. Even on those days when we're doing a lot or we're making things happen. And maybe we have an outward appearance of confidence when we're around others or we're in certain situations. But the more you get us in on ourselves, the more there's that feeling of incompetence, incapability, not enoughness, questioning who you are, how to do it, what is your role, how are you going to show up, right? All of those sorts of things come down to our relationship with ourselves. The third place that I see this show up the most is in our relationship and our faith and our connection with God. Okay. So this can show up with God directly and feeling like, I don't know if God loves me or cares about me. I don't know if I've ever felt God or the Spirit. I don't know if I can rely on or trust the things that I feel. Oh, sorry, I was muted. Let's try that again. So that third one is this place of our relationship and connection with God. And that can look like our wondering if God actually loves us or cares about us. Can we really feel God? Are we connecting in that way? What is ourselves and what is not, right? Maybe it's easy for you to feel God's love for you, but it is much harder to receive specific direction. Right. And to be able to know and trust and feel confident, like, yes, that was from God. I know that I'm going to move forward. I'm going to trust that piece there. Okay. And so that can cause all sorts of questions around, what do I believe? How do I navigate life? What really matters? What's important? What's me? What's not, right? There's a lot of things that can start to unfold as we're moving into that space in our relationship with God and faith and church, right? So these costs become real, right? When we are not understanding this pattern and provided opportunity to both experience it in relationship so that we can become it. Okay. And that is why I created the Thriving Feminine School. Okay. This is a place where you can come and through a lens of the restored gospel, begin to learn and understand this pattern and this process for becoming the woman God always wanted, for becoming the woman God created and designed you to be. Right? When we do that, that is what unlocks our capacity and our ability to be able to do the things we feel like we need to do. So if you have a long list of things that you're like, I know I should be doing this, I know I need to be doing this, I know I need to be doing this, and you are struggling to get them done, this is the reason why. You have to become that person first. And becoming, we usually think is like, oh, right, I need to be more disciplined. I need to practice more. Again, we're used to thinking in that masculine lens of development of what it looks like. That is not how you become in the feminine. It is an experiential, relational process based in your lived experiences. Right? Which then becomes, okay, well, Emily, how do you walk somebody through that process? Right? Like, you can't just create a course that's going to perfectly tell them what to study for and what the thing is that they're going to do. To which I say, you're right, I can't. But God already has. It's called your life. Okay. And regardless of what you do or don't do with me, that life is going to continue to unfold. That curriculum is going to continue to be there. But what I love helping women do is learn to gain a few of these fundamental skills, give a bigger perspective through the lens of the restored gospel of what is playing out here, and with that, help you be able to see and navigate these patterns so that, again, you know where you are in the process, you know what is happening on, so that even though you may not know the specifics of where God is guiding you or what God has in mind for you or how or when things are going to turn out, you know how to trust the process and move through it. And that is so essential for our everyday lives and our relationships, right? There is so much that is beyond our control that we cannot control, but we can become women who are strong and steady and stable in who we are and in that connection with God and in our ability to express and be in relationship with others. And when we do that, through understanding this pattern, developing those necessary skills, we become different women in how we show up, right? Again, we get that solid foundation that really allows that light to shine. And it will change your experience with your spouse, with your kids, with yourself, with God, with your community, with your work, with every desire that is on your heart. And the other reason I am so passionate about this is because the same way there are ups and downs and highs and lows in life, and we do not know exactly how things are going to turn out, when or where, but we can have a better GPS, right? Like having a map and a compass and a field guide to help us through, right? Those are all valuable things if you're out exploring in the wilderness. As we continue forward in this process of fulfilling this prophecy as women and in preparing the world for the return of Jesus Christ and whatever else happens between now and his return, there's a lot of unknown in that. So we are not going to be able to go through this process by saying, oh, this is going to happen, then this is going to happen, then we're going to do this, then we're going to do this, right? So we got to get really, really solid in finding a new anchor point, a new center place of connection in how we are relating to ourselves, to God, and to others, so that even though things become unstable, as they always happen in our lives, that's a part of life, but so we can learn to process, or we can learn how to navigate through this process as it unfolds, trusting God in this piece and in this piece and in this piece and in this piece. Because again, if women are part of this final act and we have an essential role to play, and it is necessary for us to understand our nature and to be operating in it, to me, that speaks to this is not going to be a linear thing. It is going to be a cyclical thing. It is going to be a relational thing. It is going to come piece by piece, and we need to be able to have that connection with God that is the only source that can guide us through it. Same way, God is the only source that can ultimately guide us through our life. And we have to know how to be able to walk as disciples of Jesus Christ as women, right? And that is where the power and the magic, I believe.
wrapping up here. Okay? Hit this hour and a half. I try to keep them to about that 90 minutes whenever I do these webinars. So I want to make sure we let you go here for those of you who've been here. But if any of you are interested in hearing more about the Thriving Feminine School, I want to make sure I share that opportunity. I'm going to spend the next 10 minutes or so and spend the next few minutes or so sharing with you a little bit about how I have created an experience for women. Because here's the thing, this matters so much. And so I have spent years cultivating that invites women to a relationship of mentoring and provides an experience that is guided to help support you in learning the skills and understanding the process of our feminine design and how to embody it more. So you can your relationships and your experiences and the life in the world during the last day. So the way that I've done this is schools, the Thriving Feminine guys have different experiences that are designed to help you on each one of these levels. The first one is all about relationship. So this is where we learn how to balance that relationship between the divine, get this good flow moving with our humanness as well, so that you can navigate whatever is showing up in your day-to-day life. Because let's be real, just because we have a divine purpose for things that we're here to fulfill, we're also here to have this human life. So how to integrate, so learning how to integrate those two experiences together is an essential part of it. Okay, so that is the first experience that we walk through. The second one is all about helping you learn how to live from this cyclical nature, to see the patterns, to understand those different steps in the pattern of growth and expansion so that you can recognize them in your own life. You know how to move through the process of birth, life, death, rebirth. As you're taking something intangible, giving it form, and things like that. You're going to get to a place where you live and breathe the cyclical nature, who you are and how you live. And finally, the third experience is helping you be able to stand in that light. So now that you have a deeper connection to yourself and how you operate in the world, well, now we got to figure out how to be in relationship with others as we do that. So how do you stay connected with people who are different than you? Or when you have differences, how do you communicate? How do you bring this feminine experience into relationship with masculine? How do you reintegrate masculine support dynamic into your feminine life and experience? That is what the third one is all about. If you want to hear more details about this, understand specifics of the process, you want to apply to join us, I'm going to be dropping a link that you can send, where you can learn more about it and apply to join us. I would love to have you here with us. But for those of you who are here watching this, whether live or on the replay, I want to give you a special opportunity because this is something that is so essential. So whether you end up feeling a desire to want to move through this process from a place of support, direction, community, and getting that experience of the relationship component while you are growing and becoming the woman who can live the life you want to live and fulfill what God has in store for you in that life, I want to make sure you get an opportunity to say yes to that version of me, regardless of the end of it. So I'm going to take the next couple of minutes and I'm going to ask you one-on-one specific questions. Yes or no, zero pressure here. But the question I want you to be thinking about is, would it be beneficial for you to hop on a call with me? The main point of this is just to help you get better clarity on where you are in this process, right? So if you want to join the school, do the application, click the link, I'll send it your way. But if you want to have this opportunity to join this call to see where are you in this process? What are the strengths that you already have, the things that are going on? What are the things that are not? So I want to invite you to text the word, we're going to use phone today, to that phone number again, 385-212-4267. And we'll go ahead and set up a time to talk more specifically about the things I discussed today, where you are in that process, so that you have a better understanding of what your next step looks like as you walk this journey. For those of you who are like, oh my gosh, this program sounds amazing, yes, that is exactly what I need. I want more details. I want to be a part of this. Tell me how I can sign up. Again, I want you to text the word thrive to me or use the link below. It's going to take you straight to a description with a walkthrough through some stuff about the school and the Zoom copy to apply. Thank you all for being here today. I love each one of you so good. I sometimes joke that I love really study and just women in general so much that I made getting to work and talk and speak with them and support them every day a part of my job. So I get to do it all the time. So thank you for listening, for being a part of this, and